Most people respond to trolls by fighting against them. But by doing so, they fall victim to trolling behavior. You might have heard the expression, don't feed the trolls. And it's so true. The more attention you give to them online, the more you fight against them, the more fierce they become. The only way to deal with them is to not engage in the fight that they so want you to engage in. So what I do when I see comments written by so-called trolls, comments that do not have anything of value to offer, that share no constructive criticism, but they just try to upset me by calling me names, by putting words in my mouth, by making fun of myself or our community, I simply do not engage. And what I have found is that if I ignore them, then after some time, they stop trying to bother me. Now, there are some times when I might encounter a negative comment, but at the same time, I might feel that that person who wrote it, although he's clearly trolling, he seems a little bit open to discussion, a little bit open to have an actual conversation. Now, depending on how I feel on that day, I might respond to them, not by fighting against them, not by telling them that they are bad people, but perhaps by sharing my thoughts on something that they wrote, or by making something that I had previously said more clear, but doing it from a loving place and in a way that they feel heard and understood. Now, usually that does not work. Most of the times, they continue their trolling behavior, but there have been times when I saw a change in them, in the way they behaved. People who were trolling, who were sharing negative comments, who were trying to upset me or other people, started to behave in a much more kind, compassionate, thoughtful way. They started to share constructive criticism instead of destructive criticism. So sometimes it is worth trying to engage with them, but only if we see an opening in them. Only if we sense there is a possibility that we can have a productive conversation. The last tip that I would like to share with you is to try to focus on the positive comments, on the positive messages that you receive, and not the negative. In psychology, there is something we call negativity bias. Negativity bias is when we are overly focused on the negative and we kind of forget the positive. When you might receive 100 positive comments, but you pay attention to that single comment that is negative. The reason why that happens, it seems, is that evolutionarily, we have learned to pay more attention to negative events because those events could pose threat to our survival. Something negative could injure us or it could kill us. So when we see a negative comment, we need to be aware of that because that comment is not really posing any threat to us. And we need to pay more attention to the positive comments. And when I say the positive comments, I don't mean comments that necessarily agree with your opinions. I don't mean necessarily comments that you like. A positive comment can be heavily critical of your ideas or your behavior. But the intention behind it is always to help you become a better person. That comment might be right or wrong. That doesn't matter. What matters is the intention behind it. Whereas the intention behind a negative comment is not to provide any help, is to upset you, to hurt you. It has nothing of value to offer. So to sum up, to effectively deal with so-called trolls is first and foremost important to stop seeing them merely as trolls, but to understand that they're human beings with needs, which they are trying to fulfill through their behavior. Secondly, we need to stop playing their game, to stop engaging with them, except if we sense some willingness on their part to have a conversation, to listen to us, and take our ideas into consideration. And thirdly, we need to be mindful of the negativity bias and stop paying the negative comments more attention than they deserve, and instead focus on the positive, constructive comments.